and welcome to Loppy Loves. If you haven't been here before, my name is Lauren and on this channel I talk about my life as an immigrant living in Iceland. In today's video I am going to be talking about the Icelandic healthcare system and my personal experiences with it. And the reason that I am talking about this today is because before I moved to Iceland I had heard about how great the healthcare system is. But after I moved here, I started hearing horror stories about how awful it is. So I just wanted to talk about my personal experiences for anyone that is maybe considering moving to Iceland. This might be helpful. So everything in this video is just my experiences that I've had, and so I'll put a warning here that I will just be talking about some of the reasons that I've been to the doctors, just to help me explain the stories of my experiences more. So if you don't want to hear any details about medical stuff, don't watch this video. So to start with, I didn't sign up for health insurance for the first 6 months of living here, and I didn't bring my form from the doctors that gives me access to the healthcare system straight away for the first 6 months, because I hadn't researched it very well and I kind of moved here a bit spontaneously, so I didn't really look into any of the documents to bring. And I just kind of knew that I wasn't going to need the doctors for the first 6 months, so I didn't really want to pay for it because I do not like going to the doctors. In the UK I would avoid it as much as possible, and like many other British people I would kind of try to save up problems until I had symptoms for like 2 or 3 different things and then go to the doctors for like everything in one go just to get it out of the way. I feel like since I moved to Iceland I have been going to the doctors a lot more, and maybe it would have been the same in the UK, maybe it's just because I'm getting older and different things are appearing, but I feel like I have been a lot more in the 5 years that I've been here than I did in the UK. Another reason that I didn't sign up for the healthcare for the first 6 months is because I had just heard so many horror stories from, like, basically as soon as I moved to Iceland I was hearing all of these horrible things about doctors and how expensive it was, and I was terrified about spending all of my money in a doctor's visit because it really seems like you are just going to be bankrupted every time you go to the doctor from the way people talk about it. So while I was living in Reykjavik I never signed up for a GP, I never signed up to a doctor, I never visited a doctor, and it was only after I'd been living in Selfoss for a few months. I didn't register for a GP, but I received a letter in the post saying that I needed to go for my smear test, which was my first one, and I was absolutely terrified. I knew that I couldn't miss it, but I realised it was time that I finally had to book an appointment at the doctor's here, and I'd been in Iceland for about 18 months at the time I booked the appointment, and I think I'd booked it about 2 weeks before I had to go. And I was just thinking about it constantly. I was terrified about how awful it was going to be, how expensive it was going to be, and I think I was really nervous to go, and I was kind of I was kind of thinking about cancelling the appointment just because of how nervous I was. But fate had a different plan for me and I ended up having to go to A&E a week before the appointment. So that ended up being my first experience. So one evening I was working alone at the restaurant I used to work at, and I went to take the rubbish bags out to the bins in the back, and the lights for the back were turned off and I didn't know where to turn them on because no one had ever showed me, and they were normally just on. It was pitch black outside and there were a pile of paving slabs by the bins which had just been put there that morning. I didn't know they were there. I tripped over the paving slabs because I couldn't see them, and I landed with my finger in a weird position and also hit my knee off really badly off the corner of the paving slabs, and after 10 minutes I fainted with customers in the restaurant. I had managed to text my boyfriend just before I fainted saying that I was going to faint because I have fainted many times before and I know when it's about to happen. So he came just after I fainted and he texted my boss saying that he needed to come and cover the shift because I had to go to the hospital. So I went to A&E quite late in the evening. There wasn't many people there. I think I got seen pretty much straight away that time from what I remember, but this was like 4 years ago. And I just remember how much they were like looking for things that might be wrong with me. I got there and just said like I hurt my finger, I think it might be broken, and I badly hurt my knee, and I fainted, but I just fainted because of the pain. It's not any reason that I fainted, it's just because I really hurt myself. So I think the first thing they did when they got there, they asked me to pee in a cup, which I found very weird. It turns out they were doing a pregnancy test, which I knew I wasn't pregnant. They also did a cardiograph, which was the first time I'd ever had one, and I found that really over the top, but good that they were checking everything. They taped up my finger and said that I would need to come back the next day for an x-ray because there was no one running the x-ray machines at that time of night, so they booked that appointment for me. And then I was taken into another room to be given like my diagnosis, I guess. They said the cardiography was fine, I wasn't pregnant, which I knew, and that the knee was just really badly bruised but wasn't anything too bad, and that the finger was possibly broken but they couldn't tell until the morning when I had the x-ray, and that they guessed that the reason for fainting was that I had just fainted from pain, which I already knew. So I ended up going back the next day, and that was when the experience got weird, I think. It's probably the first like negative experience I had of the healthcare here. So I was in the waiting room for my x-ray, I was called in, and the lady was lovely, but she was talking in Icelandic, and she asked me if I could speak Icelandic. Now, I'd only been in Iceland for a year and a half at the time, so I replied in Icelandic that I'm learning, but I'd rather do the appointment in English, just to make sure I understood everything. And she just smiled and was like, no. She was like, you answered in Icelandic, so you'll be fine in Icelandic, and I was terrified. So she took me in for the x-ray, and I had to put my hand like under the x-ray machine, and she was telling me in Icelandic like to put my hand in different positions to get different angles of the finger, and I had no idea what she was saying, so I told her like, I'm sorry, I don't understand, can you tell me in English? And she just got frustrated and came and just slammed my hand down on the machine in all the different angles, and that was really painful. Then after it was done, she didn't tell me, she just said it's finished. She didn't tell me where to go, if I had to wait for a doctor to come or whatever. She also didn't tape the finger back up. So I just went to the waiting room to just see if anyone was going to call me back in, because I hadn't been told anything. And maybe 10 minutes later, a doctor called me in. My boyfriend came with me, and he just told everything to my boyfriend in Icelandic for quite a while, just saying different things. And then at the end of it, he looked at me, and I just asked him, you know, what's going on then? And he was like, oh, yeah, he'll tell you everything. And they just told me to take paracetamol and ibuprofen and just let me go. And again, my finger wasn't taped up, and it turns out that there was a crack. It was like a fracture in the finger, but they didn't tell me directly to me anything. And I think that you should always tell the patient directly what's wrong, like not the person that they're with. So that was a weird experience for me. And then a week later I had the smear test, and I was terrified because of the interactions I'd had with the x-ray. So I walked into the doctor's. There was like a separate reception for the tests, because it was just 1 week where like all of the tests in the town were being done. So I went to that reception. The receptionist asked me for my name and kennitala. I told her in English, and she just looked absolutely disgusted at me. So that was not a nice experience. I walked in, got into the gown and everything, got called into the office, and I thought it was going to be awful. But luckily the lady was lovely. There was I think she said she was a midwife and her assistant, and she asked if I could speak Icelandic or English. I told her in Icelandic, I'm learning, but English is probably better for this. And she said, okay. Then she asked me for my kennitala in Icelandic. I told her in Icelandic, and she started really pepping me up. Like, yeah, like, well done, good job. And she got the assistant to start cheering as well. She was like, yeah, your Icelandic's great. It was a really fun experience. And then she switched to English and told me everything that she was doing, explained the procedure, and it was a really good experience actually. I really appreciate her, and I wish I remembered her name. I think my next experience after that was maybe a couple of years later, or a year later, I think. So I've always had trouble sleeping since I was a young child. I go through bouts of insomnia for like a few months at a time, and I was in a really bad phase of it. It was like 3 or 4 months where I was only getting an hour or two sleep a night if I was sleeping, and it was just, I was really suffering. So I decided to make an appointment with the doctors. So I called and I was told I'd be given a phone appointment rather than a face-to-face appointment, which I was like, okay, that's fine. So I was on the phone with the nurse and I explained what was happening, and I said that thyroid problems run in my family, so I would like to get my thyroid tested because that could be the cause of the sleeping problems. So she sent me for a blood test the next day, and then she called me a few days later and said, your bloods came back absolutely perfect, there's no thyroid problem, there's nothing wrong. And so I was like, okay, that's good to hear. So what's the next step? Because I'm still having sleeping problems. And she was like, well, are you stressed? I was like, not particularly. Are you thinking too much when you go to sleep? Not particularly. And then she just said, I know what you need to do. It's like, great, let's hear it. You need to read a really boring book before you go to bed. That was genuinely the advice that I received. I kind of was a little bit shocked because I thought there'd be like, you know, the next step of like testing what else could be wrong, or I don't know, given some sleeping pills or something to help. But no, that was the furthest it ever went, and it was just case closed. So that was a bit shocking. I didn't really know what to do, so I was like, okay, thank you, I'll try that. Obviously that didn't work. In the end, my sleeping problems just resolved themselves like they normally do after a few months. But again, it still comes and goes. I still really struggle sleeping, and this was a few years ago. And then about a year and a half ago, I had to go to the doctors because I've had some lumps in my breast since I was 15 years old. It's been a long time, and I was regularly going to the doctor from age 15 to 19 for that. But it's no problem, it's nothing serious. But then I suddenly had lots more, and was getting really bad pain as well. And I think I counted like 6 or 7 lumps, and so I was really concerned, and it's never hurt before, so obviously I wanted to make an appointment straight away. And at that point I decided I should register with a GP, which was an interesting experience. So I emailed the hospital and asked, how do I register for a GP, because I've never done it before in Iceland. And they sent me a form and said, just choose a doctor off this list, fill out the form, and either email it to us or bring it to the reception. So there were 2 doctors to choose from. There was a Polish one or an Icelandic one. I chose the Polish one just because I think I'd feel comfortable around another foreigner who is not necessarily going to pressure me to speak Icelandic if I'm not feeling comfortable with it. So I filled out the form and emailed it, and went to check online on my like healthcare webpage. Like, we all have a page here where you can like book appointments and things, and it still said that I wasn't registered with a GP. So at the end of that week I went in person with the form to the reception, and I handed it in, said I'm here to register with a doctor, did it all in Icelandic, and the receptionist looked at it and said, where did you get this form from? This is really old. I was like, well, it was like a few days ago, I asked for it here and they emailed it to me. She was like, yeah, this doctor doesn't work here anymore, the Polish one. And she said, yeah, and he's only really for the Polish people anyway, so I don't know why you choose him. And I was like, okay, can I have the Icelandic one then? It doesn't bother me, I just want a GP. And she just said, no. And I was like, what do you mean, no? She was like, yeah, you can't register with him. And I was like, okay, can I register with any GP you have? Like, I don't care, I just need a GP basically. And she was just like, no. That was it. There wasn't explaining it, it was just no. And I was like, why not? She said, yeah, we don't have any spaces at the moment, we can't take any new patients. And I'm like, okay, I need to book an appointment with someone then. And she asked why I needed to book an appointment. And my boyfriend was with me, he explained in Icelandic, like, she's got some lumps, she needs to have them checked to make sure it's not, you know, cancerous or anything. And they were like, oh yeah, you can't do that here, you have to go to the Cancer Society. And I was like, what? Like, normally, my experience in the UK is that you go to your GP first and then they refer you to the cancer department of the hospital or something. And so she just gave me the phone number. I was like, yeah, this is who you contact. So I emailed them and just said, yeah, I went to the doctors, but the receptionist told me that I need to make an appointment with you to have this checked. And they emailed me back saying, yeah, you're too young to come to us, so we can't help you. I emailed back again saying, okay, but the receptionist said I can't see a doctor for this, so what am I supposed to do? And they just sent me exactly the same email back again, like, we can't help you, you're too young for this. So I had to call the doctor again to try and make an appointment. Got an appointment on the phone, and I did say to the receptionist who took the call, like, this is not something that can be solved on the phone, I need to see someone in person. And they told me, yeah, you can't decide that, like, the person on the phone needs to decide if you need to see a doctor or not. So I had my phone appointment, it lasted less than 20 seconds. I just answered the phone, I was like, hi, they asked what was wrong with me, and I said, yeah, I know you can't help me, but I have lumps in my breast. And they were like, yeah, we can't help you, we'll just send you to a doctor. I was like, thank you. So I think this was a month after I'd first discovered the lumps that I ended up getting an appointment with a lovely, lovely specialist. She was very nice. I asked if I could speak English. I think she used to study in England from the sounds of it. She took me very seriously and she sent me straight away for an appointment in Reykjavik at a specialist centre. She said, you know, you've done this before, haven't you, had an ultrasound? And I was like, yeah, I know the procedure pretty well. And I got an appointment, I think, for the next day. They called me the same day and I had like an emergency appointment for the next morning. Went there and had a weird experience there. Now, it was a weird experience because it was a man doing the examination, which is fine, I've had that many times before, I'm very comfortable with the whole procedure now, I have to go in so many times for 4 years for the same thing. But in the UK, if it's a man or a woman, it doesn't matter, they will never do the examination alone. It's always, they'll get someone in to observe, just so that the patient can't sue them for inappropriate behaviour. Yeah, so it was just him, he didn't call in an assistant. Which was weird to me, but different country. But he seemed uncomfortable with the whole thing. So I told him what was going on. He was like, okay, take your top off. And I was like, okay, my bra too, just to make sure, because although I knew it was that way, he hadn't specified. And he got really uncomfortable and he wouldn't look at me, he was just like, yeah, that too. Like really nervous. Which made me feel obviously a bit nervous just because of how he was acting. He did the examination and he was like, yeah, there's nothing there, you're fine. And I'm like, okay, good. And it was very quick, he sent me, he's like, yeah, it's done. The receptionist on the way out was really awful, really, really awful. I asked in Icelandic, I just said I'm here to pay. She asked for my ID number. I gave it to her and she asked me to repeat it 7 times because she was like, yeah, I can't understand, and she was really rude to me actually. But we got there in the end, and maybe about a week later the woman specialist that I saw at first called me and she was like, okay, good news, like everything came back fine, you're okay. But again, that was like just the end of it, there was no further action, and it's 1.5 years later and I'm still in pain from the same thing. And there has never been any further action. And then a few months ago I had to go to A&E on a Sunday night. My boyfriend had bought me some roses and I always trim the stems of the roses to make them live longer, like they absorb more water and more nutrients. I'd used a bread knife because I didn't have any other knives to cut the roses, and very stupidly sliced my finger open with a bread knife. And there was a lot of blood coming out, so I kind of decided it was really important to go to the hospital. Late on a Sunday night as well, I had work the next morning. It wasn't pleasant getting up for work the next day. But that was fine. I did that entirely in Icelandic, that whole exchange. So I got there, got seen very quickly. and the nurse had asked what was wrong. I explained in Icelandic, like I was just cutting some roses, cut my finger open. She glued it back together. I had another doctor come, and this doctor was a foreigner but was speaking Icelandic and I was speaking Icelandic back. So that was fun, hearing someone else with an accent speaking Icelandic. Yeah, but it was fine. Just had to wait there for a while the glue set, and then I was on my way. That was just fine, actually. Everyone was very nice, everyone was very polite. The nurse actually commented on how good my Icelandic was, which was nice to hear, so it was a really good experience. And then earlier this year I had to go to the doctor for some bowel issues that I was having. There is an autoimmune disease that one of my parents has which affects the bowel, and I was a bit concerned that it might be that, so I went to get it checked out. Straight away the doctor was really good. When I told her the family history, she took it so seriously straight away, and she was like, okay, we're going to book you in for a colonoscopy like as soon as possible, this can't wait. She told me that she was going to refer me to one in Reykjavik because in Selfoss there's an 18-month waiting list for that, which this is a small town. I don't know how there's an 18-month waiting list for a colonoscopy in Selfoss, but she sent me a referral in Reykjavik. She said you'll probably wait like 2 or 3 months. I only had to wait a couple of weeks before I actually had the colonoscopy. They called me, I think, within a week to make the appointment, or maybe in the same day actually, I can't remember. So I went to Reykjavik for that, and everyone there was really nice again. At first there was a nurse giving me like, not an IV, but you know, like the port for an IV, like the little needle in this bit, which I hate. My god, I hate it so much. So she gave me that, and then I had to go in to see the other nurse and the doctor, and the nurse was talking to me first. I said, sorry, can I use English? She was absolutely fine. She was like, of course you can. Taught me through what was going on. And the doctor came in and said, Golden Dayan, and then she was like, it's good morning, we're speaking English with Lauren. And he asked where I was from, and he said he's been to my hometown many times, he's got friends in my hometown, and it was a really nice experience actually, considering it was a colonoscopy. They were very chatty and very nice throughout. Yeah, so that was fine. And then my most recent trip to A&E, I'd never been to A&E in the UK. I've been, I think, 5 times in Iceland. But my most recent trip was that I started getting palpitations really badly at my job one day, and I was wearing my Fitbit and my heart rate went up to, I think, 140, like just instantly, and I felt lightheaded and felt like I was going to collapse, so I got sent to the hospital, and I was seen, I think, after half an hour. They did a cardiograph, and then I was sent out to wait for the doctor, and I had to wait for a couple of hours in the waiting room. There was no one in the waiting room, or like very few people came in that time, and I had to wait for a couple of hours to go and see the doctor properly. And he took another cardiograph, he tested my heart rate, and it was still elevated, and this was like hours after the original episode, I guess. It wasn't as high as 140, but it was at like 90, and my regular like resting heart rate is about 67 to 70. Yeah, so he was a bit concerned, but he said it was probably just a virus, even if I didn't feel sick, and he just said if it ever happens again, come back, but we're not going to do anything right now because it might just be a one-off. But yeah, again, that was a good experience. Everyone was really polite to me. And actually the nurse that time, as soon as she saw that I had a foreign name, she just used English from the get-go. She didn't even bother asking if I spoke Icelandic. So I've had a lot of mixed experiences here, but personally I think that the healthcare system is improving, and I do think it's improving a lot for foreigners as well. And I think it will continue to improve. So it's not perfect right now. There are times when it's really bad and just wonder what I'm paying for. In the last couple of years I can see that they are trying to improve it, and I know that they are short-staffed and I don't think it gets as much funding as it should, but I do think that they are trying their best to improve the system, and especially for foreigners to feel more comfortable in the system. So I don't think it's as bad as some people say, in my personal experience at least, but I also don't think it's as great as some people believe. I think it's just It's okay, but it is improving. So that's it for today's video. Please like this video. Let me know in the comments below if you have had any experiences with the healthcare system here and how you found it. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!